Everyone has a story, but not everyone gets to tell it. Life gets busy. We talk, we text, but do we listen? Are you looking for real stories, raw and unchanged? Want to experience life through another's eyes, one story at a time? Daniel and Jenny have you covered. It's time to start the conversations, and that's the #truth.
In today's episode, we speak with Arlene Samen, founder and chief visionary officer of One Heart Worldwide. Arlene began her career in Utah as a nurse practitioner at age 27, specializing in maternal and fetal medicine. In 1997, His Holiness the Dalai Lama asked Arlene to save the lives of mothers and their newborns in Tibet, where 1 in 10 newborns were dying of preventable causes. In 2004, she left her clinical practice to found One Heart Worldwide. While working in Tibet, Arlene developed the Network of Safety model, which brings life-saving care to expectant mothers and infants, where the need is the greatest. In 2009, One Heart Worldwide extended the model to remote villages in Nepal and the Copper Canyon of Mexico. One Heart Worldwide has now arranged to construct and operate nearly 500 birthing centers in Nepal alone. Over the course of her work, Arlene has endured political uprisings, earthquakes, and the SARS epidemic in order to provide women safe, clean deliveries, touching the lives of hundreds of thousands of women to date. Arlene has received many awards for her efforts. Most recently, she received the Global Thinkers Forum 2016 Award for Excellence in Women's Empowerment. Arlene and her team are hard at work to bring One Heart Worldwide to scale in Nepal and globally. In 2020, One Heart Worldwide was selected as one of 6 global organizations for a case study by the Gates Foundation on the Network of Safety model. Arlene is now the Chief Visionary Officer with One Heart Worldwide. Well, Arlene, thank you so much for being with us today. We are beyond excited to be able to talk to you about all of the amazing things that you've been doing for many, many years. Can you tell us a little bit just about your organization and how all of that got started?
I'd love to. Well, I was introduced to another organization, Interplast, and they went around the world and did cleft lip and palate surgery and burns. And I worked as a volunteer for them about 10 years, and mostly in South America. And then I joined the German Interplast, and they mostly went to India. And so one point in 1997, I got, Interplast got a letter. It was a request from the government in exile in India, the Tibetan government, asking if Interplast could come and operate on some children with cleft lip and palate.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sent it to me because I had been working with the German group in India. And my friend who ran it, he said, you put a trip together and you do it yourself. And,
You're like, okay.
Okay. But, I've had 10 years of training, so I think I can do it. And so an Italian plastic surgeon, and he was part Chinese American, and a German nurse and myself went over. And then one night before we were going to operate on this children, they said, the doctor said, well, would you like to meet the Dalai Lama? And we're just like, sure. And it was the first time I heard anything about, like, do you want to have an audience? And I'm like, an audience with the Dalai Lama? And like, you can really meet the Dalai Lama. It was like we were all so excited. And
I can't imagine.
And the night before, we were, what are you going to ask the Dalai Lama? And I said, I'm going to ask him how we can help. And everybody else had some very philosophical, spiritual question.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we woke up very early and excited, and we went to the compound where he lives and had to go through all the security. And then they took us into like his living room. And it was very informal. I mean, and I'm used to, because I'm a Buddhist practitioner, that when someone like that. I mean, you bow and do prostration. And he's like, no. And we just sat on a couch and talked for a couple of hours. We showed him the work that we were doing, and he knew our background. And then he said to me, "You're a nurse, right?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he said, "You work in maternal health?" And I'm, "Yes." And he's like, "I want you to go to Tibet and help the women and children."
Wow.
I'm thinking, "Oh, okay. I don't know how I'm going to do that." But I didn't really, give it a whole lot of thought after that. And then after I got home, I got a letter from the government in exile asking me to come back and talk to them again. And then they said, "No, we were really serious. We want you to go to Tibet and start something on maternal child health." And I'm like, how am I going to do that? Because at that time, you couldn't just go to Tibet. I mean, you had to be invited, and you had to have the special permit. And everybody's like, "There's no way that's going to happen." And sure enough, and then I said, "Well, how am I going to do that?" And His Holiness said, "On the path of service, all doors will open." And about a month later, somebody told me about a doctor in the Bay Area that was doing some work in Tibet, and I contacted her. She gave me the name of a Tibetan doctor that spoke English. I contacted him, and then he got an invitation for us to come. I came with Interplast, and then we went there and we operated on some children with cleft lips and palate. And then we said, that's a whole nother story. So we got invited to back as Interplast. But then when I went back, there was a knock on my door in the middle of the night, and somebody came and said, "My wife delivered at home and the placenta hasn't come out and she's bleeding. Can you come and help?" And so I went and I said, "We've got to take her to the hospital." And then I came back from that trip and I said to the doctors I worked with at the University of Utah in maternal health, I said, "Do you guys want to go to Tibet and help?" And they're like, "Sure." So I raised some money. Enough to pay for our tickets over there. And there was 6 or 7 of us, and we went over and met with the hospital director, and the hospital director was like, "Oh, we'd love for you to come, and but we have a pretty good handle on maternal child health," and which wasn't true at all. And 1 out of 100 women died in childbirth, and 1 out of 10 babies at that time. And then there was a high risk patient, and she had had 2 children, then her last child died in childbirth, and now she presented with severe preeclampsia. Her blood pressure was like off the chart, severely anemic, and she's like going to deliver. And the high risk doctors are like, "Oh, okay, we need to try to do forceps so she's not straining." And I remember I was at the head of the bed with this woman, and then we're like, "She needs blood right away." And so we told the doctors we need blood, and they're like, "Well, she can't afford it." And we're like, "Well, we'll buy it." And so they came back with the blood, and we, pumped her all up, and then she just like literally kind of passed out in my arms. But we got the baby out, and then her and the baby survived. And it was on my birthday. So they named the baby Lamu, which was my Tibetan refuge name. When you take refuge in Tibetan Buddhism, they give you a name, and my name was Lamu. And so they named that little baby girl Lamu. And I got to see her grow up over time. And
it's like the
so
best present ever.
yeah. And then we found out that there was the NIH was just had gotten $25 million from Bill and Melinda Gates. This was like back in 2000, and it was the first time that they had given that amount of money for maternal child health. And then they had decided that NIH, that it would be a call for proposals, and they were going to select 10 sites. And so we just thought on a whim, well, why not? Why don't we try at from the university? So it was such a long shot. I mean, think about that. So of course we had to come up with a project, and we heard about a medical anthropologist in San Francisco that had been working in Tibet, and her colleague that spoke Tibetan. And so we designed this whole model of intervention that was very grassroots, where we would go out and understand the cultural and spiritual beliefs around childbirth. And we didn't want to impose our beliefs. And then we would work within their cultural and spiritual context to get them to access care earlier, to take better care of themselves during pregnancy, to understand what were complications, and then how to access care. And then if there wasn't care nearby, we would upgrade a birthing center in their community. And then we trained people in their community to become midwives, because they said, well, we can't, if a stranger comes to our birth, then the stranger can bring hungry ghosts, and then the hungry ghosts will jump into our baby and cause the baby to be sick. So we thought, oh, okay, well, instead of having a stranger at your birth, we're going to train people in your community that you know. That's awesome. And you will get to know as soon as you get pregnant, and they won't be a stranger anymore. And then at that time, a lot of the skilled birth attendants, there was no training program like that at all in Tibet. And we actually eventually built a training center, and then we would take like 15, 20 people, and they would come for 4 months to a training program in Lhasa. And then they would get their clinical experience in Lhasa. And this was all part of the NIH grant. And then the NIH folks said, well, we don't think there's enough patients to have a real outcome measure. So we want you to withdraw from this proposal. And I said, no. I said, we're not withdrawing. And if you want to take the money back, then you need to go and tell the Tibetan government and Chinese government you're taking it back. I'm not going to. And I even went to our senator at the time, Orrin Hatch, and I said, we're not going to give this money back. And so what happened is they decided to fund a clinical trial using the Tibetan medicine versus a Western medicine that reduces postpartum hemorrhage. And then that made NIH happy. And then I separated from the grant and went out and raised the money and started One Heart. And then we did the original grant, which was to go out and train what we called skilled birth attendants in the community, and then teach them to do the deliveries, and then when to refer, and known as the network of safety. And so that's sort of a little bit of the history around how that happened. And then people ask me, because there's so many fun stories, like about breastfeeding. And so sometimes they would give the baby butter, which is like an offering, but babies can't really digest that at birth. I mean, it's too rich. And so to change that behavior, we said, okay, well, the mom should take the butter, and then the blessings will come out in the breast milk. And then they were like, oh, okay, that works. Oh, nice. All the time we were adjusting so that we would be able to meet them where they were. And the cool thing is that in the communities where we worked, the maternal mortality went from 1 out of 100 to 0. And newborn deaths dropped from 10% down to like 2 or 3%. Because we went out and taught them, how to resuscitate babies, and how to know which babies were stillborn or not, and how to manage and refer if they thought they had pneumonia or diarrhea. And so, yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's an outcome. Oh my
That's
goodness.
extremely cool. That's
Yeah.
really exciting and amazing.
Did you ever have any follow-up with the Dalai Lama to say, hey, we did it? Yeah.
Well, I've met with him off and on over those years many
Okay.
times, even though it was always a risk because of the Chinese, the political situation there. And so I would try to have to meet him really in private situations. And he would always say to me, you have to do more. And, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not talking to you anymore. But it's been lately, because now I've stepped down as the CEO and I'm the chief visionary officer. A lot of my friends have said, you should let the Dalai Lama know, how much that you've accomplished and where things are at. And I thought, yeah, I should do that.
Now, was there a specific reason or situation that, was on his heart or in his experience that asked, like, for the reason that he asked you this, I want you to work with women and children?
Yeah, his mother had 16 pregnancies.
Mm-hmm.
And only half of them survived. And so they didn't necessarily die in childbirth, but died under the age of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he was very close to his mother. And in fact, sort of there's like I wouldn't call it, it's kind of an orphanage in Dharamsala with children that didn't have parents, but they didn't adopt the children out. They grew up there. But his mother started that. I mean, so he was very, very close to his mother. Oh. And he really felt that a mother's love is the pure and unconditional love in the world. So that was very important to him. And he's written a lot about that love.
Mm-hmm.
So he just didn't, we needed more Tibetans to survive.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking back at that first moment when you decided to move forward and go do this, do you think, oh my gosh, how did I do that? Or, does it surprise you? Or
oh no, it totally surprised me. And when I had, because it was very challenging, of course, with mostly the political situation at first. And we never knew if, if we were going to get our permit to, our contract to work there or not. And it was just always stressful. And I had a picture of His Holiness next to my bed. And then I'd talk to him, oh, this is like so hard. I don't know if I can do it. And many times when I met with him, he said, never give up. Mm-hmm. Never give up. And so I okay, well, this is the doozy. And the weirdest thing would happen, like during the night, I would get some kind of a download of what to do. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, we're going to have a training center. We're going to build a training center. And then, my board and my staff was like, okay, and then I had this dream one time that I was sitting with His Holiness in a home movie theater. It was just the two of us and a big screen. And I looked at him, I said, how come I knew what to do? And then he slapped me on the leg and laughed and said, because I downloaded it into your brain. And you're just projecting it like a movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, that totally makes sense. So I guess as much as anything, it was really a spiritual journey for me about never giving up and non-attachment and trusting myself, trusting a higher force. And, my mantra was, okay, I'm willing to do this and I'm willing not to. Mm-hmm. And I will keep doing it as long as the money is there, as long as we have permission to work. I will be that conduit. So that was really my commitment, is I will be the conduit until I'm not, until I know it's time for me not to be that conduit, and then pass it on. But that took a long time because, then we got kicked out of Tibet, and I just thought, oh, no way am I starting this over in another country. I just don't have the energy to do it after being held at gunpoint and witnessing the uprising in Lhasa. I just thought, I'm going to go back to my regular job. This is just too much. It was very traumatic. But no, my Tibetan staff said, well, we're going to start over, and you need to too. You need to take what you learned here and pay it forward. That is this was a gift, our gift back to you. You need to take that and pass it on. How could I say no? Because they had faced so many challenges and they kept it going. I mean, the Tibetan staff got an award from the China CCTV of Charity of the Year.
Oh, wow.
So they carried on and they asked me to carry it on. And so that's how I ended up in Nepal. It's like, okay, we're going to start over. And there were no birthing centers really in Nepal. Maybe you'd find a dirt floor with this archaic looking table that in a bucket. And it's like, okay, that's not going to work. And so our first birthing center was in a small village that was on a very high cliff. And if something went wrong, the only way to get a person to the hospital, which was across the river, was literally to carry her down this switchback mountain and back up the other side until a road was built. And so that was our very first birthing center. It would take hours, and people would have to carry the pregnant woman on a stretcher, over treacherous cliffs. I mean, it was crazy. And now we have 500 birthing centers in Nepal.
Wow.
That's a lot. From zero.
From zero.
I mean, you didn't just run into a couple of stumbling blocks. You had some like major opposition and barriers that you had to work through. And I can't even imagine how scary that must have been while those things were going on. But then you got that call again to say, keep going. And, so many times in life, people can, you experience something like that and it's immobilizing, after you made that decision to kind of go forward and say, all right, I can't say no, I'm going to do it. I guess, what was that like? And, kind of how did you get over that hurdle of, I'm doing it?
I remember it very specifically because I was on the plane being evacuated out of, Tibet. And I was like, no way, I'm done. I cannot do this anymore. And then after I got home and I was rested and really actually saw somebody about the PTSD. I mean, because that kind of haunted me, that witnessing that kind of trauma. And the really strange thing is, like, maybe 15 years before, I hadn't even never gone to Tibet. I took refuge with the Tibetan Lama, and the Lama got up off his cushion, came over to me and pointed like a gun. And he said, even if a Chinese soldier has a gun at your head, you will take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I'm like, I'm never going to be in China. I'm not going to be, why would I need to do that? So at the time that I was held at gunpoint, it was this moment of a good day to die. I had no fear. I mean, it was like, if that's what is meant for me, I am, in my spiritual home in Lhasa, right in front of the Jokan temple, which is the most sacred Buddha statue. That's a good day to die.
Wow.
And after that, though, what really bothered me was the witnessing of the soldiers beating the the Tibetans and knowing people were being killed and there were fires and explosions. And that really bothered me, that I felt helpless to help them.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to kind of work through that. That was a bit of trauma for me to work through and understand it was karmic. And so then it just, like, Nepal kind of presented itself to us as an opportunity. And I thought, okay, I can do this. I don't think we'll be facing those same kind of challenges. Although then 5 years later, we had those 2 major earthquakes there. But yeah, I mean, it just, I guess I just didn't think about it too much. I mean, I just was like, okay, put on your big girl pants. Here we go. But I also loved it. I loved
dust yourself off.
Dust yourself off. But I loved it. I loved being able to be in the field and sit with the mothers and the women and understand their challenges, and then to be able to offer something for them, because otherwise, I mean, you can imagine you're up at 15,000 feet in the Himalayas, and the only way out is to walk 100 miles, and you're 9 months pregnant to get help. And there's no guarantee a helicopter could come and get you. We had to do something. I mean, it was just like, we have the ability to do this. Why wouldn't we do it? So it was I think my Buddhist practice helped a lot, like, okay, be willing to do it. And if the money and everything comes in, then do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do that, like that Nike commercial. Just do it.
Sponsor.
Yeah, we can. Yeah. And then, like the beginning of COVID last year, it was like, okay, we decided with the board, it's time to get a new CEO. And I'll stay on as the chief visionary officer, but somebody else now can carry the baton. And it was like, okay, there's money in the bank. We've got a solid program. We have a solid staff. It's going to be a piece of cake, but of course, then the pandemic hit, and then it was like, okay, it's just working in a developing country. And now we're all facing, global warming and fires and earthquakes and all these things, natural disasters. You just have to be really resilient, and just keep asking, well, what can I do? Not what can I do?
Yeah.
Like, what can we do right now?
And it sounds like, we were looking on your website, you guys were able to do a lot to support through the pandemic.
Yeah. And, one of my board members who's no longer in this dimension, she transitioned, and she always used to say, relationships save lives. And that is very true, because our relationship with Direct Relief, which is the disaster relief organization in Santa Barbara, they have been working with One Heart from the beginning. I mean, so when we were in Tibet, they would give us skill birthing kits and help us to get delivery kits and things like that. So we have a very long relationship with Direct Relief. So when the earthquake happened, they actually called me up and said, somebody's flying over tonight from Direct Relief. We need you to get a warehouse, a truck. Here's the list of supplies that you need to get until we can get stuff there. Right now, you can go buy them. And we actually were the very first responders during the earthquake. Wow. Our team, and I was an emergency room nurse in the past, and I think that helped to kind of triage, like, okay, our mission is to save the lives of mothers and babies. And right now, we knew 16,000 women in our districts have no access to care. So we need to get out to them. And then this company in Utah donated these like glamping tents, and was like, how are we going to get them over there? And then Direct Relief said, well, we have a cargo plane leaving Monday. If you can get them to Santa Barbara, we'll get them there. And just like, it just worked like that. And then we actually could set up these glamping tents into birthing centers.
Mm-hmm.
And now the Direct Relief and that company, Typhi, work together, and Typhi donates directly to Direct Relief. And so that Direct Relief has those tents for all their disaster relief.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have everything that goes in them to set them up as a birthing center, like in Haiti. And that's never been done before. I mean, whenever disaster relief goes over, they're thinking about the trauma, orthopedic, neuro. Nobody was really thinking about moms and babies. What do they need that's different? So with Direct Relief, I mean, in that earthquake, we learned like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to focus on the moms and babies? And so that was a really cool thing that came out of it. And then with that relationship with Direct Relief, then now when the pandemic started, we reached out again, and they were just so gracious to get a cargo plane over there and take all of that stuff. And now we have a relationship with the government. They trust us, and we can get it in duty free and disperse it. And so, yeah, we're flexible. I mean, that's part of it.
It must be so wonderfully fulfilling to be around such a huge group of people that have such a heart of service.
It is, yeah. And they're they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, both of you. I mean, this is an act of service.
Mm-hmm.
And we often forget that, that every day in every way we can be in acts of service, whether it's the way we talk to somebody at the grocery store or whatever, every interaction, even with each other, it's like, okay, I can choose to ignore this or be upset, or I can choose to look at you and say, what do you need from me?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do for you?
That's an amazing. It's very true what you're saying, and it's also an amazing perspective to have, but it's what makes things better in our world, just with the people immediately around you.
Little acts of kindness. And often when anybody asks His Holiness about his religion, he says, my religion is kindness.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, but we often, like somebody cuts in front of us and we're just like, that makes me so mad, what's the hurry? Or it's just like, oh, they must need to get someplace. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to practice it myself because, we can get angry about things. But if we just take that moment to say, oh, that person may be suffering, and that's why they're acting that way or something.
Now, when you were, how old were you when you realized I want to be a nurse?
Oh, that's a funny thing. When I was 16, I lived with my aunt and uncle in Germany, and he was a general in the Air Force. And part of being at school as an international student, we could do they had like a little job fair. And I remember I took a job working in the radiology department at the hospital. And I told my mom, I will never be a nurse. And then in college, I was studying to be a child psychologist. Mm-hmm. And one summer I got a job at a restaurant, and an OB/GYN doctor used to frequent the restaurant, and he offered me a summer job to come work in his office. And once I did that, I was like, it's so beautiful to be able to witness a baby growing inside another human being, and then to have, be present at the birth and get to know the child as they grew. And so I switched majors and got into nursing school right away. And, I think that life it's already sort of I know a lot of people don't believe this, but I do believe there's some synchronicities and destiny, and, that there's sort of a map or a plan, like, okay, and not everybody listens to that, right? You have to listen to, one of my teachers said to me, well, if you're not listening to yourself, who are you listening to? And I had to think about that for a minute. I'm like, okay, I get it, because we get those intuition or downloads, like, and then opportunities present themselves and we don't always follow it. And that's okay too, because, we go off in a different direction, but I try to listen to my intuition. And in that case, everything just kept lining up. And then I knew I wanted to be a nurse practitioner, and I got into school right away. And I knew I wanted to work in maternal child health. And so I spent my whole nursing career working pretty much in maternal child health.
Were there other points that stand out to you that you look back on and go, that was another one of those pivotal moments where my destiny kind of laid itself out before me?
I just think that, just like these opportunities of like, oh, here's a job for you. And then at one point I moved to the Navajo Indian Reservation. And then while I was working there, I was offered a job with maternal fetal medicine doctors in Flagstaff. And it was just like always like one thing connected to another. And it was really my experience on the Indian reservation that gave me this like understanding in a way of the Tibetan culture, because they're very similar in so many ways. And it was almost like, okay, well, now you're going to go over here and have this experience. And then, then the next door is going to open. And it was like always one thing built on the other, like, why am I on the Navajo reservation? Well, I learned so much about their beautiful culture and how important it was to respect that. And that gave me so much insight to really working in Tibet. And like I said, there's so many similarities with the Hopi and the Tibetans and the Navajo. In fact, some of the Tibetan people that have come to Utah, they went to the reservation, they would talk to them in Navajo language. They were like, oh, they weave rugs like we do. They do sand mandalas like we do. There was just like so many similarities. Yeah. Fascinating, really. And I love that part too. I love like being in different cultural settings. Like I worked a little bit in Ecuador in the jungle with the Pachamama Alliance, and they reminded me of the Tibetan people too. Their resilience and their connection to the earth and medicinal plants and things like that. Yeah, it's been really a privilege.
Yeah, it's really, really incredible. The whole opportunity, everything that you guys have done, are still doing. If you had you've given us so many already, but if you had one lesson or one takeaway that you've learned from this experience that you would want other people to, gosh, you have to experience this, what would this be?
I think really to immerse yourself in another culture that has nothing, and really witness the joy and happiness and the adaptability of other people and their cultures, and to really be grateful for what we have. We have so much.
Yes.
I knew, when all of these things happened, these challenges, that I was going to go home, to my own home, my warm bed. And many people in the world don't have that, and after the earthquake, to see that kind of devastation, and yet people still came together and out of the rubble would offer us a cup of tea. It's just like, I want everybody to witness that kind of humility and generosity. It's remarkable.
If somebody wants to get involved and they want to help and they want to support what you all are doing, where do they go? What are the ways you can help?
On our website at info at One Heart Worldwide, they can go there. I mean, we often have interns that help, like they may be college students and maybe they're wanting to get a background in fundraising or PR and communications, or they want to help us to write medical articles, like if they're a resident. So there are a lot of volunteer opportunities. I mean, right now, nobody's going to Nepal because of COVID.
Right.
But the big thing is always helping us to fundraise and get the word out. And like, this is an organization that, 90% of their money goes to really the field and the programs and making us, one of their charities that they want to give to. That's really helpful. Just like, really expanding our network. And sometimes it's, people that it's $5 or $10. And when I see those donations come in, I write everybody a personal note, because I feel like for that person, $5 could be $5,000 for somebody else, right? So to me, that act of giving like that is should be acknowledged.
That's awesome. It really truly is just amazing. And you're very humble, but I'm sure this is just incredible.
It is.
I always say I'm the conduit. It's like, okay, I'm willing to sort of plug into the outlet, and I'll be that conduit. And it's really a privilege. And I couldn't have done it without everyone. I mean, it's not something I did alone. I mean, every one of my staff they risk their lives every day in Nepal. They risk their lives every day in Tibet when they went out to the field. I mean, so, it really takes a village. It really takes a universe, and every donor is part of it. Every intern we've ever had. I mean, it's a group effort. I mean, there's no way I could have done it by myself. I was just the one that didn't, no matter what, said, no, we're not giving up. That was my motto. It's like, no, we can do this, and we did it together.
Yeah. And there's such honor in it. You're honoring the safety protocol, you're honoring the model, you're honoring these moms and their babies and the culture and their beliefs. And,
that's so huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
and the getting somebody to come in as the new CEO, it's like, I've said, there's always that cliche, like, oh, you can never fill the other founder's shoes. And I'm like, you don't need to fill my shoes. You need to have a new pair of shoes, and you need to be able to run the next marathon. Yeah, that's what I need you to do. You don't need to, my shoes are worn out. You need to have new shoes. And you need to carry that baton. And that's not easy. And, I think I chose wisely. And I think David is also a very humble, and he worked with IRC, worked in Afghanistan and Somalia and Ethiopia and Kenya. So he has seen a lot. He's faced a lot. And so I think in that regard, we chose wisely to have somebody that knows how to navigate disasters. Yeah. I mean, that's like, you couldn't do it if you didn't have that skill set. So, yeah. We're lucky to have him and the staff that we have. We just have an incredible team, really very devoted, and they don't have to be. It's not an easy job.
Right.
I'm sure it's not.
No, especially in Nepal and the traveling and them facing COVID and having to get out there and deliver the things that the nurses needed and make sure that the moms and babies were safe. So it's been a big job.
Yeah. I know everything's been complicated by COVID, and it just requires so much extra planning and risk. And but they keep going. They got on their new running shoes.
Yeah. Everybody gets a new pair of running shoes.
See, that's the second time I thought this is like a Nike sponsorship waiting to happen.
Yeah, well, I do wear Nikes.
We do too.
Yeah. Yeah, if we could get Nike involved, that would be amazing.
Right
about that. Yeah. They do a lot with girls and women, so we should try to strategize around that.
Definitely. Anything that you want to add, or any stories you want to share that we maybe didn't ask on?
I know, you've said, well, what's next?
Yes.
I've had this fascination most of my nursing career around hospice. And, it makes sense because I've always been about helping people to transition into life.
Mm-hmm.
But I've often thought about being able to do something to help people at the next stage of their transition out of this body.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm starting to study some things on palliative care, and I trust the universe that something there will open up as well, and looking at being able to do something with mental health and hospice, and it's something that can be useful if we want to add that to our programs in Nepal or wherever we go, because we're all going to die. And so being able to be better prepared. I mean, the Tibetan people, and I think even the Nepali, because of their religion, there's a lot more, not that they're not tragically sad, but there's a lot more acceptance around death. And in our country, we don't talk about it very much. We feel uncomfortable when we know somebody has a terminal diagnosis, what to say, what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's sort of, I think, where I see the next chapter of my life is being able, now they're calling them death doulas. I'm not sure I like that terminology, but I like being a midwife during that time too, the transition time.
Kind of like a complete full circle of healing and helping. And that's incredible. We look forward to hearing more about where that road of service leads you and what doors will be opened in that process.
Yeah. And One Heart, we have a commitment in Nepal to be in 75 districts. There's 75 districts, and our commitment is to be in 35. So we're well on our way there, and we would like to raise the money to do that faster. I think we have about 15 left to go. And it's a 6-year process, because once we enter into a new district, then we have to understand the culture there, which could be different from the Himalayas to the jungle. And then setting up how we're going to implement the programs and where we need to put the birthing centers. And then it's several years of implementing that, and then several years where we transition out. And so the goal is to finish our commitment in Nepal, but also to get the government hopefully to just say, well, we love this model, the network of safety, we're going to implement it in every district. And, part of what we do is to really get the government and the local government and the upper government to be committed to the program. And so now they're paying about 50% of the cost of the birthing centers. They're hiring the nurses that go through the program to be skilled birth attendants. They're managing the clinics themselves. And so we want to continue to grow that partnership so that none of the clinics and none of the program collapse after we leave. And so we keep a close eye on that, because we want it to be sustainable and scalable, and maintain that quality of care. So we are putting a lot of effort into that. And then eventually we're looking at, what country is the next, or multiple countries, and how will we work in those countries? Will we be consultants and teach others to do the network of safety so that we can do it faster? And so the network of safety is everywhere. I guess that's my big vision, is that the network of safety is just adapted in all countries that need it, and that all women have access to a safe, clean delivery, and they don't have to risk death in order to give life. So that's what, I hope in my lifetime I get to see that.
It sounds like you have
That's
an
amazing.
incredible model and such tangible outcomes that, it's really easy for anybody to get on board with it. And in any capacity, it's really exciting to hear about even the opportunities you have for volunteering, for students, for financial contributions. There's really something anybody of any place can do to help. And it's a wonderful cause.
Yeah, and the network of care is really, the network of safety is so cool because it doesn't leave out any components. Like we've really thought through what are the challenges to lack, that women don't access safe care. And then whatever those are, we've addressed it. We educate the family, we educate the community. We make sure that they have transportation to get to a birthing center. If there's a complication in the birthing center, they can pick up a helpline and call for help. And they have somebody, an OB doctor on the phone to help them to manage the case until they can get them out. And then we work really with driving policy change at the government level. And so, it's like, I think the big takeaway for me is like all of that has to work. And if you've ridden a bicycle, if you have a couple of the spokes break, the wheel doesn't turn right. Yeah. So we think of it as like that, like the mother is really the center, and then everything is around to provide every little thing, whatever it is that will help her to get the care that she needs and take care of her. So I love the model.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And it can be adapted anywhere.
Right. Now, have you been, do you work in the States as well, or?
Well, right now I'm the part-time chief visionary officer for One Heart, and I am not doing anything else at the moment. But
I'm sure that keeps you very busy.
Yeah. But we have considered in places where we may expand are places in the US, because there are states that the maternal and newborn mortality are quite high. Texas, some of the border states that have a high Latino population, Ohio, believe it or not, parts of Chicago, outside of Illinois, where the populations are more African American, that have earlier pregnancies, have greater risk. The African Americans are much higher risk of having complications than Caucasians, just because of they have a gene that they can end up with hypertension a lot easier, diabetes. So the need is also, very apparent in our own country. And when I was in San Francisco, Oakland, California had a lot of problems. So we talk about that, like, why not here? Why not in our own backyard?
Why not everywhere?
Right.
Well, that's my big vision.
Right, that's your big.
The visionary officer is to wave that magic wand. Like, why not? Why not the network of safety in the U.S.? We need it. I mean, there's every woman that dies really breaks my heart. I mean, I read every case in Nepal because we collect the data and the stories behind what happened. And I'm always like, she didn't need to die. She didn't need to die.
That's heart-wrenching.
Yeah. It's heart-wrenching. And that drives me to keep going, because I know that we can help.